When we talk about death, whether it's in movies or books or just those late night conversations you have, we almost always default to the same few images.
Right.
The white light, the tunnel, maybe a sense of drifting away peacefully. It's comforting, It's this idea that the transition is, well, it's soft.
It's the fade to black ending or crossing the bridge. I mean, we use metaphors because the reality is the biggest unknown we have. So we fill the gap with things that feel safe or at least understandable to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I've been digging into the source material for today's deep dive. It's a transcript of a sermon and Bible study called A Lost Soul's Journey by John Lansing. And I have to say, safe is not the word I would use here.
No, not at all.
This isn't some vague, ethereal philosophy about the afterlife. It reads more like a technical manual for a piece of heavy machinery. And the machine does not look friendly.
That is a really accurate way to put it. Lansing isn't offering comfort in this text. He's offering a schematic. He takes these disparate verses from all over the Bible, Jonah, Job, Jeremiah, Psalms, and he acts almost like a cartographer. He's trying to map out, step by mechanical step, exactly what happens to a lost soul.
And by lost soul, he means someone who dies as a non-believer.
Correct. He's mapping their exact journey from the literal second their heart stops to the moment they hit the bottom.
And when you say map, you need a literal map, like with actual coordinates.
Literal coordinates, north, south, up, down. It involves physics. It involves a very specific mode of transport and a geography that completely redefines how you might look at the ground beneath your feet and the sky above your head. We're tracing the lines Lansing drew to see where they lead. And I will warn you now that destination is incredibly bleak. But the journey he describes is fascinatingly complex.
It really is. It's like a horror story with engineering diagrams. So let's start at the beginning. The geography of the soul, the body dies. In the movies, the ghost pops out and wanders around the hospital room. What does Lansing's map show?
Well, first, you really have to understand where the ultimate destination is. Most people think of hell as a spiritual dimension, right?
Like another plane of existence.
Right. But Lansing basically grabs a shovel and says, no, dig down.
Yeah, this part of the transcript felt incredibly claustrophobic to me. He cites Matthew 1:4 and Amos 9.2, but he takes them so literally, he's talking about the heart of the earth.
He argues that hell is a physical, actual cavity located in the geometric center of our planet. The magma, the Earth's core, that's the exterior wall. And he uses this really vivid analogy. He says if you had a backhoe, like a drill big enough, you wouldn't drill into another dimension. You'd physically break the ceiling of this place.
Which is terrifying enough on its own, just thinking it's right there beneath us. But then he brings up the story of Jonah to explain the mechanics of the soul. And this is where I got a bit confused at first, because I thought I knew the Jonah story.
Most of us do.
Right. Guy gets eaten by a whale, he prays, he gets spit out on the beach. He didn't die. That's the whole point of the story, isn't it?
That is the common Sunday school understanding. But Lansing flips it completely. He points to the text where Jonah says, I cried out of the belly of hell.
See, I always thought that was just poetry. Like someone saying, I'm having a really bad day, I'm in a living hell.
Lansing argues it's absolutely not poetry. It's a literal location check. He connects it back to Matthew 12:40, where Jesus says, as Jonah was in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth.
Okay, I see where he's going with this.
Right. Lansing's logic is this. If Jesus actually died to go to the heart of the earth, and he's directly comparing himself to Jonah, then Jonah must have actually died too.
So the physical body was in the whale.
But the soul separated. That's the very first rule of this map. Separation. The body is effectively cargo. It stays in the whale or the hospital bed or the grave, but the soul is released.
Okay, so the soul is separated. And this is where the map really gets wild, because you'd think gravity would just pull the soul down to that heart of the earth immediately, right?
Right.
If hell is literally straight down, you should just sink.
But you don't. According to the verses Lansing pieces together, the soul actually goes up.
Up. I thought up was the good direction.
Usually it is, but in this specific cosmology, there's a buffer zone. Lansing calls it the deep, or the second heaven. And this requires a bit of a rewind to ancient cosmology to really make sense of it.
Lay it on me. What exactly is the second heaven?
Okay, so the first heaven is our sky. The atmosphere, where the birds fly, where the clouds are. The third heaven is God's throne, the ultimate destination for the believer.
Got it. First is sky. Third is God's throne.
Right. But in between them, what do we usually think is out there today?
Space. A vacuum,
Yeah.
stars, planets, just a lot of cold emptiness.
Exactly. But the ancient Near Eastern view, which Lansing leans heavily into here, is based on Genesis. Specifically where it talks about the waters above the firmament. He argues that space isn't an empty vacuum at all, it's an ocean.
A literal ocean.
A literal, spiritual, water-filled ocean that physically separates Earth from the third heaven.
Wait, so when we look up at the night sky, Lansing sees water.
He sees a seething pot.
Yeah.
He describes it as this vast, turbulent, chaotic sea suspended in the void. And the crucial thing is, it's not empty, it is inhabited.
Okay, that changes the vibe of stargazing significantly. But let's go back to the soul for a second. You die. Your body is on Earth. You need to get to this space ocean. How does that happen? Do you just float up like a balloon?
No, and this is where that machine aspect you mentioned really kicks in. Lansing argues that the mechanism of extraction for a lost soul is a whirlwind.
The whirlwind.
A violent supernatural storm. He contrasts this with Elijah in 2 Kings. Elijah was taken up to heaven by a whirlwind, but with chariots of fire. A chariot is a vehicle. It's an escort.
Right, it's an honor.
But for the lost soul, Lansing implies a much darker, mechanical version of this. He pulls from Proverbs 1 and Proverbs 10. The whirlwind passeth, so is the wicked no more.
He also referenced Psalm 58 and Isaiah 40, right? Where God blows upon them and the whirlwind takes them away like stubble.
Yes, and he really focuses on the agricultural imagery in Isaiah 41, the threshing instrument and the fan.
Right, I read that part. But I pictured, I don't know, a strong gust of wind. But he describes it more like an abduction.
Think about an ancient threshing floor. You have the wheat and the chaff mixed together. You throw it up into the air and the wind physically separates them. It drives the useless chaff away. Lansing is saying, in this scenario, the lost soul is the chaff. The whirlwind is basically a supernatural vacuum system designed to remove the debris.
That is incredibly impersonal.
It is entirely industrial. It's not some cartoon demon dragging you down by your ankles. It's a force of nature, or rather a force of God's justice that physically sucks the soul out of the body. He literally uses that phrase. Sucked out.
So you're ripped out of your body, caught in a tornado, and thrown upward into this water, into the second heaven.
Exactly. You're violently deposited into the deep. And this is where the detective work in his transcript gets really strange. He goes back to Jonah again. Remember, Jonah's body is in the whale on earth, but his soul is on this journey. Jonah 2.5 says, "The waters compassed me about, the weeds were wrapped about my head."
Yeah, and again, I always assumed that meant regular seaweed because he was thrown into the ocean.
But Lansing asks a logical question based on his map. If his soul is what's traveling, what kind of weeds wrap around a soul?
Oh, right.
He suggests these are supernatural entanglements, the weeds of this second heaven, the turbulence of this chaotic, seething ocean. You aren't just floating around peacefully up there. You're trapped in a highly hostile environment.
You're not alone.
No, you are definitely not alone.
This is the part that genuinely made me put the transcript down for a second and just stare at the wall. Because he starts talking about what actually lives in this ocean in the sky.
The Leviathan.
The dragon.
Yes. He connects this region, this seething pot mentioned in Jeremiah 1, which faces north, to the habitat of the Leviathan described in Job 41.
And north, in his mapping, is the direction of God's throne.
Right. So in this northern region of the second heaven, there is a boiling witch's brew caused by the movement of the devil. Job 41 says of the Leviathan, "Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, as out of a seething pot." Lansing paints this picture of a massive serpentine entity that inhabits the waters between earth and God's throne.
And he creates this image with the stars. I have to ask about the stars because this sounded totally insane to me at first glance, but within the logic of his map, it actually fits. He says the twinkling of the stars isn't atmospheric optics.
No. He suggests that what we see as twinkling from down here on Earth is actually the physical disturbance in those waters caused by the dragon moving through the second heaven.
That's turning the entire cosmos into a haunted house.
It creates a sense of scale that's really hard to wrap your head around. If the movement of this entity is visible as stellar distortion from Earth, we are talking about something unfathomably massive. And you, the newly extracted soul, are just this tiny piece of chaff dropped right into its tank.
But why? That's what I kept asking myself.
Yeah.
Why go through all this trouble? If the final destination is the heart of the earth, straight down, why does the whirlwind suck you up to the dragon's den first? It seems like a massive detour.
That is the big question. Why the flyover? Lansing suggests it's for a meeting. A confrontation.
A meeting with the dragon.
He calls it meeting your hero or your king. The underlying theology here is that if you lived your life rejecting God, you were de facto following the adversary, whether you realized it or not.
So it's about facing the consequences of that choice.
Yes. So before you are put away in the final holding cell, you are brought face to face with the entity you actually served.
So you're suspended in this dark, cold, turbulent ocean, entangled in these spiritual weeds, staring at this massive Leviathan and realizing, oh, this is what I chose.
Precisely. It's the ultimate moment of terrifying clarity. The deception is totally stripped away. You see the hero of the rebellion for what he actually is, a monster in a boiling pot.
That is incredibly bleak.
It is.
But the journey still isn't over. We're still up in the second heaven. We haven't hit the heart of the earth yet. So how does the soul get from the sky down to the core?
This brings us to the final stage of the mechanism, the inversion. Lansing quotes Psalm 146.9, "The way of the wicked he turneth upside down."
And just like the rest of the map, he takes this completely literally.
Physically, literally upside down. He visualizes the soul being physically inverted, battered by the whirlwind, positioned head down for the drop.
But right before that happens, right before the actual drop, there's one last detail he includes, and I think it might be the coolest part of the entire map.
The glimpse of the temple?
The glimpse, so yeah.
Yeah, he goes back to Jonah 2.4 for this. "Yet will I look again toward thy holy temple." Now remember the geography we've laid out. You are in the second heaven. You are facing north. You are just outside the perimeter of the third heaven where God is.
So you can actually see it.
According to Lansing, yes. You can see the glow, you can see the structure, you see the peace and the perfect order of God's domain. It's everything you are about to lose forever.
He calls it adding insult to injury.
It's the ultimate contrast. You're in the chaos and violence of the whirlwind, looking at the perfect stillness of the temple. You don't just fade into darkness. You are shown the light, and then you are forcibly turned away from it.
And then gravity takes over.
Or rather, supernatural gravity. Lansing references the Exodus account of the Red Sea. He points out how the enemy sank as lead in the mighty waters.
Sank as lead. So you just drop.
You plummet. You pass back down through the atmosphere, pass through the crust of the earth. He uses this imagery of the earth opening its mouth to swallow the soul. It's a violent, rapid trajectory from the absolute height of the second heaven straight down to the center of the planet.
And when you finally land,
You land in what Jeremiah 10.22 calls a den of dragons.
the den of dragons.
The suggestion is that the isolation of the whirlwind finally ends, and you rejoin the ecosystem of the lost in this literal place of torment. But now you're locked in. The earth has closed over you.
Man. You know, what really gets me about this whole deep dive isn't even the fire and brimstone stuff. We've all heard that before. It's the bureaucracy of it, the sheer efficiency.
The mechanics of it all.
Yeah. There's a specific wind designed for transport. There's a specific holding area in the stars. There's a specific physical orientation for the drop. It feels like watching a sorting machine on a factory floor.
That's a really great observation. It completely strips away the romance and the mystery of death. In Lansing's view, it's just a system. The argument is that God is a God of absolute order, and apparently that order extends to disposal just as much as it does to salvation.
There was one final thing near the end of his transcript that really twisted my brain, though. We spent all this time talking about the geography. Up, down, north, south. But then right at the end, Lansing says something about a door.
Ah, yes, the door.
He says the entrance to hell and the entrance to heaven are at the same door, or that they are deeply connected.
Yeah, it sounds like a topological puzzle at first.
How does that even work? If hell is in the center of the earth and heaven is above the sky, how can they share a hallway?
Think about the exact path we just traced on the map. The lost soul goes up first.
Right.
It gets extracted by the whirlwind. It goes to the northern perimeter of the third heaven. It looks at the temple.
Okay, I'm following.
So a saved soul and a lost soul actually travel the exact same initial trajectory when they die. They both go up. They both approach the presence of God. They both come to the very threshold of the third heaven.
So everyone, regardless of what they believed, walks down the exact same hallway.
Exactly. The difference isn't the physical location they travel to. The difference is the reception they get when they arrive. At that specific point at the door, one is welcomed inside. The other is seized by the whirlwind, turned upside down, and cast out.
Wow. That implies a terrifying level of proximity. It means hell isn't just a million miles away in the dark. It's a rejection right at the doorstep of heaven.
It creates a tremendous amount of tension. It means that the absolute closest you ever get to heaven might be the exact moment before you were sent to hell. It maximizes the sense of loss because you were right there. You could see it.
I think that's why this transcript sticks with you so much. It's not just a simplistic bad people go to the bad place narrative. It's this complex, tragic odyssey involving space travel, ancient monsters, and a final heartbreaking look at what could have been.
It effectively removes that gentle drifting to sleep metaphor we started with and replaces it with a high-stakes, violent reality. It leaves you with a very provocative thought. It forces you to ask, if this map is real, where exactly am I on the chart?